Turning Round Uganda, your alternative policy documentary series, whose aim, like the name suggests, is how to find alternative policy to Uganda's unending problems. Now, over the last several months, I sat down with interviews and debates with over 30 intellectuals and policymakers in as many fields as governance, the economy, corruption, just to mention but a few. They are trying to address your concerns about the future progress of this country.
We've tolerated nonsense.
Government cannot abdicate its responsibilities to its people.
CHIPI is built on a very weak foundation.
We can't improve service delivery by just talking about it.
We need to venture into manufacturing.
Where is the budget that talks about this value chain? Where is it?
There are mechanisms through which the resource curse manifests itself.
What is happening?
It's ridiculous, I will say it again, for any nation to be indebted.
Where do we want to see Uganda 50 years from now?
We cannot talk about democracy until we have dealt with the question of who actually owns Uganda.
When will this Bush mentality end?
You know very well that even in some areas, the number of votes received was higher than the registered voters.
It's too short-sighted to just stick around power.
Mismanagement of this transition can lead to a failed state.
The population can be extremely forgiving if they are aware that you have saved them from worse, turmoil by stepping down.
Uganda, the way it acts, if people in public service can steal 340 billion worth of pensioners, if people in health can scream off most of the money for the healthcare sector, if you say government of Uganda should own a bank, you are putting Dracula in charge of the blood bank. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not have hyenas in charge of the meat market.
Is it about time that Uganda should abandon her current policies in the different sectors because they don't seem to be working? And if so, what are the alternatives? I'm Simon Kasiate.
This is Turning Round Uganda, the alternative policy series. Coming up on the program.
Since when did government money be banked on the account of an individual? Miriam Matembe.
I don't believe for a minute that Kazinda was acting alone.
Fighting corruption today is becoming fighting government.
If you get them, punish them. Do not work with them. Do not instead promote them.
Corruption, it's been said, is worse than prostitution. While the latter may endanger the morals of an individual, the former invariably endangers the morals of an entire nation. Uganda has finally come out of war, but a new enemy who threatens to destroy the entire nation looms: official corruption. Uganda collects about 7 trillion shillings in taxes annually, and according to the World Bank, a significant portion of that money, to a tune of $300 million, is lost to corruption. Corruption is the abuse of public power for private gain. Corruption is a major threat facing humanity. It destroys lives and communities and undermines countries and institutions. It generates popular anger to destabilize societies and aggravates violent conflicts. Corruption does not only fuel such problems, it makes it difficult to stop them. The Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority, PPDA, estimates that more than $100 million, that's about 260 billion shillings, is lost every year in procurement corruption alone.
Every document in front of me here, when I open it, the amounts of money that has gone missing are scary. You can't believe it. It is in trillions. It's in trillions. You just look at what went missing in public service. The pension of poor people. People who are dying before they have even got their sweat. They have got the fruits of their sweat.
In the last 5 years, for example, a total of over 1 trillion Ugandan shillings has been stolen from government. And that is just the amount so far known. Now, below is a summary of the biggest scandals we have so far heard about in the last 5 years. Over 27 million US dollars, that's about 70 billion Ugandan shillings, meant to organize the 2007 CHOGM in Kampala was stolen. In 2008, 10 million US dollars, that's about 26 billion Ugandan shillings, of the Global Fund to fight malaria, AIDS and tuberculosis was stolen. In July 2008, 11 billion shillings of workers' funds at the National Social Security Fund was lost in the infamous Temangalo scandal. In the early 2010, 19 billion Ugandan shillings meant to print national identification cards was stolen. A year later, 1.7 million US dollars, that's about 4 billion Ugandan shillings, supposed to supply 70,000 bicycles for the local council one chairpersons, was stolen. Shortly after that, we got the news that another 60 billion Ugandan shillings went missing from the Microfinance Support Center. Now, towards the end of 2011, 169 billion Ugandan shillings was reported to have been erroneously issued to one businessman, Basaja Balaba. Then in 2012, we learned that 169 billion Ugandan shillings meant to clear outstanding pension claims of about 1,018 former East African community workers had been stolen. And more recently, 50 billion Ugandan shillings was lost in the office of the Prime Minister.
The scandal in the office of the Prime Minister is simply, if you think who it is this money was intended for, the people of northern Uganda, with all that they have gone through, I'm just thinking, oh my goodness.
An kilwanyana kwero Christian. Kimi konyo at palotini ini. Wakolo to mi ne wakero. Magwakolotini. Pelotini ne be wan gi pepe yan ana dati megigi. Megire me mugane awango lil no gi gwar be. Chi kamente ka do twere. Umi kero pon migilotini ini at yeno ni wakolo to gugwakilotini anan. Man lega na mati kanena. Na machel yat. Mi ario kony mo marwata ki mi ukar me gwakolotini ini. Ki chamugo mabeje beje maramo dwako gubo kin mai karcha. Ki kampala no ulto aneno ki mine gi udi chak gi mo ki mine gi dwako ker lutin mo wadu ker gine ulto pe kir ini man ko ber geno pera gankan. Omio gudwako gubo gudwako pinge. Chika giramo mi ukar mo ki lutin ini chalo di gine go mete senta ma megwa ka ini ni. Arian ma megwa ni. Melo tiano gamo di ki senta kanyo jingo lo gubo gi. Man wo di ni dong pe senta kan ki lutin.
The number of services that haven't been delivered are so many. The hospitals in Uganda are looking the way they look because somebody is stealing. The schools are looking the way they look because somebody is stealing. So the impact is on everybody of us.
It's unbelievable. If you think, my dear brother, that 320 people are dying every day, that's the estimate from the national figures given by the government. 320 people dying every day to malaria. 16 mothers dying every day due to pregnancy related, either in childbirth or pregnancy related complications. I say to our president, frankly, why can't you develop a security system that protects those Ugandans? Because when we were arguing for more money for the healthcare system, the argument of the president was, no, I will not compromise the security of this country. I will not compromise the security of the people of Uganda. And I'm saying, Mr. President, it's already so badly compromised. 320 people are dying every day.
Bribery, misappropriation of public funds, nepotism, and influencing the formulation of laws or regulations for private gain are common examples of corruption.
But you know, we have always told you that this is not corruption. It should be called outright open robbery. Because where things have reached now, it is even unbelievable. You can't believe it. Right now, the levels are where they are because there is no authority in this land. There are no systems. There are no procedures. It is to whom it may concern.
Corruption translates into human suffering, with poor families being extorted for bribes to see a doctor or to get access to clean drinking water. It leads to failure in the delivery of basic services like education and healthcare. It derails the building of essential infrastructure as corrupt leaders skim funds. Corruption can amount to dirty taxes, and the poor and the most vulnerable are the most affected.
Recently, I think sometime back last year, the intensive care unit of Mulago was closed down. I mean, how can you have an intensive care unit of a national referral hospital closed down? Look at what is happening in our health centers, up country. There isn't anything like medicine. Look at the teachers. There's what you call presentism. They're teachers in class, but they're not teaching. They are there, but because you forced them, because they cannot strike. At one point, they were supposed to strike, but you said, no, if you strike, we're going to chase you. They said, okay, fine, we're going to come and we're going to be in class. The teacher will be in class, the students are in class, the teacher is just moving around. Now, that is how far corruption has gone. And then also the quality of education. If you look at the children that are under UPE, look at the children, the type of education they're getting. Then you have ghosts. How do you have ghosts within a system that is supposed to fight corruption? That shows you how far the levels of corruption. And service delivery has definitely been affected because you have very poor service delivery because of the rampant levels of corruption that government has failed to curb.
We've managed to convince people that morals are only for the pulpit. They're only for sermons, whether delivered on Sundays or Fridays. That the rest of life is to be governed and guided by pragmatism, by what works. You find out what works and you do it.
Corruption occurs whenever parents pay teachers illegal fees to give their children an education, when citizens give public officials gifts or money to speed up procedures, and when drivers bribe police officers to avoid a fine. It may be seen as a way to get things done, but this is a crime.
Today, you get a graduate and say, okay, you graduate, you come, I'm giving you a job. And what is the job? The starting job in civil service? Maybe around 600,000 or 500. The first question they will ask, is there a project there? What other allowances do I have? Do I have a vehicle to myself? So our attitudes have changed. We are no longer what it used to be, So things have gone wrong. We need to reconscientize people.
People are staying in the civil service because there's something to collect. Because otherwise you wonder why someone who has got a degree would stay in an office collecting 200,000 shillings a month and is driving a car and building houses and so on.
Corruption is a big problem the world over because many political elites don't care about their people's needs. They enrich themselves instead of enriching their populations.
When I keep listening to this radio, TV, when the park is interviewing people, ministry to ministry, department to department, everywhere revealing all this rot. And when I keep hearing 190 billion put on an individual account of an individual employee, I just cannot imagine it. I just cannot understand. Since when did government money be banked on the account of an individual? Me, Miriam Matembe, on my account, personal account, I get, even if it was 2 million or 3 million belonging to the government.
Really, that's against the law. And if people in the OPM's or Prime Minister's office were law-abiding, they wouldn't do any such thing. Now, of course, people explain this away by all kinds of technical explanations. Now, they say, look, if it's donor money and you get it and you don't spend it on time, you have to give it back. So to avoid giving it back, you have to hide it somewhere. But of course, this hiding of the money does breed a problem, and we have all seen it. Now, is that preferable to giving the money back to the donors? Maybe. To those who are criminally minded, maybe.
And then you hear the president, the head of state, defending a permanent secretary, that he is a whistleblower. Okay, assuming the permanent secretary is not involved in these scandals at all, is he fit enough to sit in that chair?
I don't believe for a minute that Kazinda was acting alone. I really don't think so. I don't believe for a minute that the permanent secretary of the Prime Minister's office knew nothing about it. I think he knew. But I'm surprised that President Museveni and the Prime Minister have come out and defended him. Surely. He's the PS. He's the administrator of the ministry. And if you're the administrator of a ministry, regardless of the claims that he was a whistleblower, if you're the administrator of a ministry and you fail to that extent, money gets stolen from under your nose in that kind of way, I think that you need to lose your job.
Because this is the head of the institution, the one responsible for accountability. Does he run a ministry without policies, procedures, and regulations that govern finances? What has happened to the systems that run governments?
Uganda emerged the country with the highest levels of bribery in East Africa, according to the East African Bribery Index 2012, a survey by Transparency International.
That shows you that in East Africa, we are, if I might use the words, far ahead of the rest in as far as involving ourselves in corruption is concerned. When you go internationally, we are rated 130. And what does that mean? Because if you look at the rating, you might think we are very far. But the rating in as far as Transparency International is concerned starts from far. So the more corrupt you are, the higher number you are. So internationally, out of around 156 countries that are rated, we are 130. That means even internationally, we are near the first line. We are 20 positions away from the 156 countries. So that shows you how big the issue of corruption is in this country.
The judiciary and the land services are second to the Uganda police, which tops the list of the bribery-prone institutions, polling at 40.7%, up from 38% the previous year.
We have the laws in place. The institutions are in place, much as they may not really be strong. But when you look at the high levels of impunity whereby people think they can do whatever they can do and get away with it, and indeed we've seen a group of people that have done particular acts and they've got away with it. If you look at the current Anti-Corruption Act, we don't have provisions yet for forfeiture and attachment. A person can still, get away with it. They'll stay with the proceeds of corruption. You will arrest them, but when they come out, they're going to enjoy the proceeds. And then also, we have people that are not yet demanding. The locals are they still feel apathy. They would rather sit back. They feel it's not their role, or they feel that it's the role of government or a role of few civil society organizations. So as a result of that, they will not demand. And we also have a government that doesn't want to give information.
The value system, the fact that people think that I can be corrupt and still be valuable as an individual, In a village, a thief is chased and seen as bad, but when we call him a corrupt individual, then people don't think he's a thief, but actually they are all thieves.
The Public Accounts Committee met His Excellency the President in a Carcero State House. And in my opening remarks, I told His Excellency, Mr. President, we are here to help you sweep the dirt from your room. Cooperate with us. We are here to help you. Now, furthermore, I went ahead and told His Excellency that, Mr. President, sir, I think we need to walk the talk against corruption. Because there are still many people whom we really see here in this country who get themselves in corrupt tendencies and actions with impunity. They seem to have backing. They seem to be the type of people who are treated with kid gloves.
One big challenge of this nation is the lack of people-centered, service-oriented leadership. A leadership which is interested in the participation of the people as opposed to power. A leadership which is interested in serving the people as opposed to dominating the people. A leadership which is interested in giving to the people rather than getting. That type of leadership, a visionary leadership which has a vision and not an ambition, a leadership of integrity, whose goal is to unite the people of Uganda for development rather than dividing them so that it may rule them. That is one big challenge that we face.
There are a number of anti-corruption institutions. These include the Inspector General of Government, IGG, with the constitutional powers to investigate and prosecute cases of corruption and abuse of power. The police, with the power to investigate corruption, while the Director of Public Prosecution, DPP, has the powers to supervise such investigations and prosecute those cases.
The prosecution has been there, but look at the magnitude of the monies that have been recovered. Look at the nature and the caliber of people that have been prosecuted vis-a-vis the other people that had been lined up. I mean, if you look at this, it's still a gimmick. I mean, if you're talking of Chogam, we all know what happened to Chogam. How many people have been prosecuted? Have the funds been recovered? No funds. But there's an Auditor General's report that says that monies were stolen.
With all these institutions in place, without the political will to make corruption highly risky and dangerous for the people, without strong punitive measures to deal with the corrupt, you cannot handle corruption.
Although these institutions are in place, government's credibility is being eroded by failure to take action against corruption or to enforce sanctions on poor performance and malpractice.
Look at the amount of money that Che took vis-a-vis the other amount of money that we cannot account for, and yet the ministers allegedly that were involved were acquitted. So, I mean, there is a mismatch, and I think what really hurts Ugandans is where government itself is coming up with reports, the same reports implicating the government officials, and guess what? At the end of the day, they're exonerated. The Auditor General is being investigated. I mean, what actually the other gimmick is why I have Parliament investigating the Auditor General's report. I mean, it is so ironical because does Parliament have the expertise to investigate? Then afterwards, Parliament to say, actually, these people they go for a caucus, they come back. No, there's no case to answer. Money has been stolen. Then Parliament is investigating the Auditor General's investigated report. It is a gimmick, and I think it's an embarrassment to our government.
As the country grapples with the seemingly endless corruption scandals, one wonders whether the government has the moral will, the political will, and the claws to fight the vice by prosecuting and charging the perpetrators.
When I was a minister, by 2003, that's when I had passed in Parliament the leadership code and then the statute, IGG statute, to strengthen that institution. And we passed the law that the IGG should be instituted by 3 people, the Inspector General of Government and 2 deputies. And can you imagine, until 2011, that is how many years that office has been vacant. I mean, has not been properly constituted. As if that was not enough. At one time, I think, is it for 1 year or 2, it was working with just an acting IGG. And an acting IGG who is at the mercy of the president. And mark you, he went to investigate these cases of Chogam, where fantastic sums of money were lost. I think you saw a clear mockery of justice of the prosecution of the 3 ministers. I think you saw it. First of all, when Bukenya was put in, the president declared Bukenya innocent. And you expect the acting IGG, who is at the mercy of the president, to come out now and declare Bukenya guilty? Who is he?
Although corruption has eaten much of Uganda's society, it is absolutely possible to stop it. There are countries that have resolved to have a zero tolerance for corruption, like our southwestern neighbor, Rwanda. Fighting corruption in Rwanda started in a conventional way, but has since gone on to include the support of the private sector, helping the government to tackle the problem at 5 levels. First was the political level. There had to be a strong political will among the leaders in order to influence policy and implementation of strategies. Second, at the level of prevention and enforcement, laws were enacted, institutions and systems of transparency, accountability, and monitoring were set up. Third, The creation of special units like the police, judiciary, and National Public Prosecution Authority to investigate, prosecute, and adjudicate corruption cases. Fourth, the government of Rwanda made doing business in the country easier by simplifying and reducing licensing and registration procedures, mainly through the increased use of ICT. This removed the need for business people to cut corners and, of course, eliminated corrupt officials who would take advantage of the lengthy and complex processes. All the above, accompanied by prosecution of offenders, whether they are from the public or private sector, while the recovery of stolen assets is also ensured, making corruption a very risky venture.
When Turning Round Uganda returns,
for instance, you are prosecuting Kutesa and you bring his permanent secretary who is supposed to be working together hand in hand with him to be a witness against Kutesa. Are you crazy?
Understanding corruption is one step towards fighting it. Now, corruption by its very nature is an extremely secretive crime. And so without eyewitnesses, gathering physical evidence becomes a painstaking process. It is therefore not without a doubt that we have very few successfully prosecuted cases.
How can you get a case and you are prosecuting and you get your witnesses who are the witnesses of the accused? All the 11 witnesses, they came forward as state prosecution witnesses and they all gave evidence in support of the prosecuted. And I want to ask, if you are a person holding this office, didn't you look at the summary of evidence? Didn't you interview your witnesses to see what they are going to say? And then you say, or you see what they are going to say, and you look at the case and say, yeah, I have a case here. But you go, for instance, you are prosecuting Kutesa, and you bring his permanent secretary, who is supposed to be working together hand in hand with him to be a witness against Kutesa. Are you crazy? And you bring the Solicitor General, who is behind all these things, and you as the IGG, and you bring them to be your witness, and they come in and they support the other people, and they all come out spot clean. Do you know what was being done? The government had staged, because the public of Uganda is saying the ministers are involved in the robbery of Chogam money. And to silence the people of Uganda, you stage a case, the IGG brings it in court, and it is just mockery, and these people come out nicely. And I heard Kutesa saying, those who say that we are corrupt, they hate development.
Corruption is inevitably tied to the politics of the day. Corruption has become a way of life in Uganda's politics. The rampant corruption and lack of political will on the part of government to fight the vice is the inevitable consequence of regime longevity and regime survival.
You have seen prosecutions that always produce quite surprising results. People committing the same offense and being sentenced to different punishments. Or people committing the same offense, some being forgiven and others being locked up. That has to be political.
The type of conviction which appears to be selective has undermined the little effort that the government is doing. I'm not here to condone anybody who is corrupt. But you see, when you get these 4 big chiefs, government money, global fund money, and all these people are real, they took a lot of money. And out of these, you get only Mukura being seriously punished. Then you look back and say, why is the only person punished is Mukura when the rest have gone free? Then you start looking at what could have been a problem with Mukura. Then you say, maybe this is political.
There is a political edge to all this, that the PS at OPMs is being let off the hook because allegedly he's a whistleblower, while the PS at public service has been sent to Ruzira. Now these things do surprise. What is the difference between these two guys? One presides over mass theft in his ministry. He gets sentenced to a prison term. The other one does exactly the same thing, and he gets defended right, left, and center. The question is, what's going on? Now, we have had stories, and you may not have been following this, but I think this had to do with the elections in 2006, when allegations were made in the press that money had been taken out of a particular ministry and taken to some individuals in sacks. Now, those of us who interest ourselves in investigating these things, we think that there is some credibility to that story, that money actually does get siphoned out of government to go and perform political errands. Now, that is fueled by politics. And this political system of ours that gives one party the space to win and take everything and exclude everybody else, I think it breeds that kind of corruption.
The government is increasingly in the habit of diverting development funds to administration and luxuries for ministers. In November 2010, the Daily Monitor revealed that development aid funds had been diverted to buy 8 cars for government ministers.
Turning Round Uganda, the Alternative Policy series suggests ways that government must fight corruption. First is the political will, and it comes from the head of state, the president. If there is any rot in leadership, it normally starts from the top. The president must therefore create a values-driven government. You cannot run a well-performed government without values. Raise the risk for corruption. In China, people are executed for corruption. Make sure that assets are recovered and put to the rightful use. There should be public wealth declarations and the means by which the wealth was acquired by leaders. Corrupt leaders should be banned from public office. Leaders must take responsibility if money is stolen right under their watch, not to be hailed as whistleblowers. For instance, all ministers and heads in the office of the Prime Minister should have resigned because all were responsible for that scandal. Corrupt companies must be banned from public contracts. Make corruption an election issue. Voters should hold leaders accountable to qualify for their vote in the next elections. The opposition too should not just lament, they too must qualify to be voted into office.
Public awareness of the dangers of corruption is important for citizens to resist the temptation of corruption, report it, and be willing to act as witnesses in court. This is one of the initiatives of the anti-corruption authorities, which have been implemented together with the media.
Now the thing is, for us, we have said as civil society that to fight corruption, we must take the war into ourselves. We must do something that will show dissatisfaction, but also do something to change. So that's how we started the whole Black Monday movement. And the issue about Black Monday is to say, every Monday, if you really care about this country, put on black as a sign of saying no to corruption.
Of course, very sadly, fighting corruption today is becoming fighting government. When we started this Black Monday movement, we thought the police would join us. In fact, we decided that we should put the front picture of our second newspaper was "Our police deserves better." We actually thought that the police would join us to say, in order to have better services, better welfare, the army, everyone. Surprise, surprise. Police warns Black Monday activists. Police is now warning those who are fighting corruption.
Before we used to go as leaders, or you come from Kampala, go down to the grassroots, do the monitoring. But now we are training them, and they themselves are able to monitor, government services, the health or education. We're giving them information, and they're able to understand the degree of corruption or the degree of theft of their resources. Because as long as they do not have the information, as long as they do not engage in monitoring and knowing that, okay, these funds were meant for us and nothing has come out of these funds. So if they get that information and they indeed know that government sent us probably 4 billion to do this and this and this, and nothing has come out. If you give them that information, they're able to use that information to hold their leaders accountable. Definitely it is going to be a gradual process, because that is something that we have started, which wasn't there before.
The fight on corruption should not be a fight about persecuting people in the anti-corruption court only, but it should be a fight about returning stolen money. That's where the end should be. So our success is not in just saying no, but it is in saying, yes, government, get back the money. Convict people, but get back the money. Because that is what a citizen will benefit from the trial. The citizen doesn't benefit from a long, well-written judgment by a judge, but the citizen benefits from the fact that a trial has said, get back the money to these people. So for me, corruption is that hard, but also that simple.
The moment we go beyond that you send people to prison, regardless of whether they are your relatives or not, but more importantly, that they have been adjudged to have been corrupt, that they have caused the loss of financial nature, which should be public resource, then will be seen to be walking the talk.
The moment you have your evidence, reports that so and so, embezzled funds, do not keep them in. Punish them, interdict them, conduct the investigations. Let them move out of the office while investigations are being conducted. Then thereafter, bring them back.
We are more interested now in value for money audit. We are now more interested in the 3 E's of utilization of money. Was there efficiency in the utilization of that money? Did you use the money in the best interest of this country? Could this money have done much more than you claim it has done? The efficiency. The economy. The economy. Of what use is your utilization of this money adding to the economy of Uganda? How? Then the effectiveness. Did you use this money very effectively and efficiently? Because you could get this one book. Somebody can come and say this book is 1 million shillings. But do you think that will be the best way for you to account for money, because you have raised a receipt which shows that this small book is 1 million shillings? Is that the best way? How much more could you have done with that 1 million shillings that you will have generated economic development in this country?
We need to have amendments to other laws. We need to have amendments within the Constitution, because as you know, it is hard to prove beyond reasonable doubt in criminal cases that somebody has stolen. So we must change now and put the burden of proof to the defendant. Let the defendant now have the burden to prove how we got this money, so that it becomes easier now for the prosecution to go ahead with these cases. We need to have changes in the Leadership Code of Conduct. We need to have changes in the IG Act. All these laws need to be changed to ensure that what we are doing now is facilitated, because the law does not work alone.
I see solutions as changing the leadership and then focusing at rebuilding the moral fabric of Ugandans.
We need more tougher laws. And I know what was this thing? The Sarbanes-Oxley rules in the US. You want to get to a level to say, if you have stolen money for pensioners and the pensioners have died, maybe there is some manslaughter element to put on you. If we can attribute their death to their failure to access their pension, you want to go beyond where you are.
The leaders that we had voted into office are the ones sending this country to the dogs. We have watched them do it and continue to vote for them. This kind of corruption has reduced democracy to the basic concept of citizens electing their own dictators and people feeding governments, instead of the conventional concept of a government elected by the people, for the people, and government feeding the people.
The election issue rests in the hands of the voters. You, as a voter, can't hold accountable a leader to whom you sold your vote. As voters, you must know that you pay taxes. Everything you buy from shops is taxed. Matchboxes, paraffin, sugar, salt, Pampers, name it. So it's your money that you have entrusted with government, and so when it is stolen from government's hands, you should demand accountability. Government is not doing you, the citizen, a favor by building roads, schools, health centers. They are obligated. Government is your servant because you, the citizen, pay their salaries, and when they don't perform, you ought to fire them by not voting them back into office.
The aim of this program, Turning Round Uganda, is to get alternative policy or reforms that can be undertaken to turn the tide to foster development for this country in the years ahead. It's against this background that we suggest to you as an individual ways that you can use to fight the vice called corruption. Everyone has a role to play in stopping corruption. Governments, the private sector, civil society, and individuals or citizens. Citizens against corruption, you must be vigilant. 1. Vote wisely. If a candidate offers you money for your vote, chances are high that they will be corrupt once they're in office. 2. Do not pay any extra fee for any services other than that which is required and obtain proof of payment. 3. Expose all forms of corruption to the authorities. 4. Shun the corrupt officials in church, at functions, and in the markets. 5. Acquire information from your local government. 6. Demand for accountability. It's your right, and change starts with you. One comic once intimated that do not steal, government hates competition. But I say to you tonight, let's dismantle this, not by stealing to grant government that competition that it so much doesn't like, but by fighting with all our might government theft and graft. I want to thank you, our experts, for chipping in, and you, the viewers, for watching. You can keep those comments coming on our Facebook and Twitter handle. The name is Turning Round Uganda. Our parting shot tonight will be the eternal words of American producer and documentary filmmaker Edward Griffin. He says, and I quote, "To fight government corruption is the primary obligation of patriotism," end quote. And indeed, end tonight's edition of Turning Round Uganda.